This video is made to help you relax and even fall asleep too. Remember to like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are from and what time it is. Now, sit comfortably, relax and enjoy today's story. The city of Eldergate always wore fog like a veil, soft, silver, and just thick enough to hide things. It was the kind of place where gas lamps hummed low, cobbled streets clicked under hurried shoes, and secrets hung in the air like perfume. People passed by without meeting each other's eyes. The past clung to the buildings like soot. Detective Hal Granger never cared for fog. He found it dishonest, like a man who smiled too wide at the wrong moment. That night, the mist was especially heavy as he stood outside 27 Wexler Row, the site of the city's latest riddle. "Third body this month," muttered Officer Janice Lee, flipping through her notepad. "Same MO, eyes closed, hands folded, not a mark on M." Hal crouched beside the pale figure on the stoop, a man, late 30s, sharply dressed. His shoes gleamed. The expression on his face was strangely peaceful. Too peaceful. "No sign of struggle," Hal murmured, adjusting the collar of his trench coat. "No ID either?" Janice shook her head. "Clean pockets. Like the others." A silence settled over them, broken only by the distant clatter of a streetcar. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then stopped. Hal studied the victim's folded hands. "Why pose them like this?" he wondered aloud. "It's too careful. Almost reverent." A soft wind stirred the edges of the man's overcoat. Something about the scene felt ritualistic. Almost holy, if murder could be holy. "We need the coroner," Hal said, standing. "And I want to look at city morgue files, pull anything strange from the past 5 years. This isn't someone losing control. This is a message." Janice raised an eyebrow. "Message to who?" "That," Hal said grimly, lighting a cigarette with trembling fingers, "is what I intend to find out." The next morning brought rain, not the cleansing kind, but the type that soaked through clothes and wore down spirits. Hal Granger stood inside the Eldergate precinct, leaning on a chipped filing cabinet as Janice dropped a box of old morgue files onto his desk. "You're looking for weird," she said. "Well, this box is full of it. Cold cases, oddities, flag autopsies." Hal flipped the lid. Yellowed folders, brittle with age, peeked out like relics. He sifted through them with a quiet urgency, his eyes scanning years of death reports. Natural causes. Overdoses. Unsolved stabbings. Then, one report caught his eye. October 17, 2021. Unidentified male, approximate 40. Found seated at bus stop, hands folded, eyes closed. No visible injuries. Caught undetermined. He held the report closer. "Janice. This one. It's almost identical." She leaned over his shoulder. 3 years ago. Same pose. "That can't be a coincidence." "It's not," Hal replied. "This guy was first. The one who started it." There was a smudge on the corner of the report. Hal rubbed at it with his thumb, and uncovered a faint handwritten note beneath the stain. It simply read, "The Bishop returns." "What the hell does that mean?" Janice asked. Hal didn't answer right away. The name sparked something distant in his mind. Not a case he'd worked, but a story he'd heard from someone long retired. Whispers about a figure who operated in shadows, leaving cryptic signatures and posed corpses. No motive. No trail. He leaned back. "Find me everything you can on anyone nicknamed the Bishop. Rumors, urban legends, police chatter, whatever exists." Janice scribbled a note and left the room, her footsteps quick. Hal sat for a moment longer, staring at the files. A storm brewed behind his eyes, one born not from fear, but from memory. The Bishop. He hadn't heard that name in nearly 10 years. And if the Bishop truly had returned, Eldergate was about to remember what fear felt like. Hal couldn't shake the name. The Bishop. It looped through his thoughts like an echo in a long hallway. Eldergate had buried the legend in whispers and forgotten case files, but Hal remembered one detail, A story passed to him during his rookie days from a grizzled detective named Avery Holt. They were at a dive bar, the kind with low ceilings and a jukebox that only played Heartbreak. "There was a man, back in '09, Holt had said, nursing a drink. "No fingerprints. No DNA. Just bodies, all folded like prayer and left where someone would find them. 4 in total. Then he disappeared. Just like that." "You think it was the same guy?" Hal had asked. Holt only muttered. "He called himself the Bishop. And like a good chess piece, he only moves on diagonals, quietly, with purpose. Watch your corners." That was all Hal ever got out of him. Now, more than a decade later, Hal stood outside an old cathedral in the North District. It had closed down 5 years ago, abandoned, ivy climbing the stone like grasping fingers. But it matched something from the case file of the 2021 victim, a scrawled note, not logged officially, that mentioned a chapel and absolution. The gates creaked as Hal stepped through. The smell of rot and wet stone hit him first. Pews lay scattered in the nave like bones. The altar was bare, except for a single white pawn chess piece placed neatly on the center cloth. Hal stared at it. A message. He knelt beside the altar, brushing away decades of dust. Etched into the wood beneath the pawn was a name. R. Mallory. He snapped a photo and called Janice. "Run this name, R. Mallory. Connect it to anything in our system, living or dead." Janice responded after a moment's pause. "On it. You sound spooked." "I am," Hal replied. "I think the Bishop wants a game. And he just made his opening move." By the time Janice called back, the light was beginning to fade behind Eldergate's smog-tinted skyline. Hal stood in the cathedral's shadow, phone pressed to his ear. "R. Mallory," Janice said. "Full name, Robert Mallory. Former city councilman. Went missing in 2010, presumed dead. Disappeared without a trace after a corruption inquiry. No body ever found." Hal let that sink in. "So the Bishop is calling back ghosts." "There's more," she said. "Mallory was tied to a group called the Pillars. Secretive circle of businessmen, politicians, clergy. Whispers of blackmail, bribes, you name it. Most of it buried. There was never enough to prosecute. Until Mallory vanished." "Exactly." Hal hung up and looked again at the pawn on the altar. It wasn't just a message, it was an accusation. A piece of history pushed back into the light. That night, Hal combed the archives. Boxes of newspaper clippings and sealed interviews. One photo stopped him cold, Robert Mallory shaking hands with Bishop Elias Kearns, the former head of St. Augustine's Cathedral, where Hal had found the pawn. Kearns had died in 2011. Officially, it was a stroke. But unofficially? There was suspicion, rumors of silence bought with donations and buried scandals. And then the church went dark. Hal lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. One bishop dead, another name scratched into the altar. The bishop, whoever he was drawing lines between men who thought they'd escaped justice. Hal leaned back, rubbing his temples. "If this is a chessboard," he whispered to himself, "then someone's clearing the pieces." Just then, a knock rattled his office door. It was Janice, face pale. "You need to see this." She handed him a manila envelope. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, another body, eyes closed, hands folded. The message written in red ink on the back chilled Hal to the bone. "The night moves next." The crime scene was in Harrow's Reach, a crumbling district of abandoned row houses and shuttered pawn shops. The kind of place the city forgot when progress moved a few blocks east. The body had been found in a burned-out tenement, resting against a blackened hearth like it had chosen its grave. Janice stood at the door, arms crossed, while Hal ducked under the caution tape. The place reeked of smoke and mildew. Candles, fresh ones, had been arranged in a perfect circle around the body. Ritual. Precise. "This one's different," she said. "He was posed, yes. Same way. But the floor beneath him was scrubbed clean. Someone went to great lengths to purify the space. Hal stepped closer. The victim was older, 60s maybe. A long coat, well worn but expensive. A gold signet ring on his right hand glinted under the flashlight's beam. Hal slipped on gloves and gently turned the man's wrist. Harold Vexley, Hal said, recognizing the ring's seal. Real estate tycoon. Former head of Eldergate's zoning board. Janice narrowed her eyes. Wasn't he one of the people named in the Mallory investigation? Buried in red tape, Hal muttered. But yes. He was protected. Too many friends in high places. Not anymore. There was something else tucked under the corpse's hand. A white knight chess piece, upright, perfectly centered. Hal picked it up and turned it over. Burned into the base was a date, June 14th. 12 days from now. Janice looked at him. What do you think it means? I think the bishop doesn't just want attention, Hal said. He's setting the tempo. Each piece, each body, it's a countdown. She shivered. To what? He didn't answer. But deep down, Hal suspected the truth. This wasn't just a game. It was judgment. And the bishop was only getting started. 12 days. That was all Hal could think about. 12 days until the next body, if the pattern held. That gave him a clock to race. The bishop wasn't just a killer. He was orchestrating a performance, each move deliberate. The message was sharpening. Back at precinct headquarters, Hal requested clearance to access the city's sealed corruption files, documents buried during the Mallory inquiry and long thought untouchable. It took a favor from the chief and a promise Hal didn't plan on keeping. He descended into the municipal archives beneath City Hall, an old vault lined with dust-laden shelves and humming fluorescent lights. He signed the registry, then wheeled out 3 boxes marked Pillars, 2007 to 2010. Janice met him there, eyes red from lack of sleep. You think these names are on some kind of hit list? I think they're part of something much older than this case, Hal said. Look at this. Mallory, Vexley, and at least 4 others were all part of the Eldergate Redevelopment Council in '08. Big money. Bigger secrets. He unfolded a faded blueprint, stapled to a memo. The Crown Project, he read aloud. What is that? Janice leaned in. Never built. Public backlash, if I remember. Allegations of embezzlement, forced evictions. And then the records go quiet, Hal murmured. At the bottom of one document was a list of signatures. Mallory, Vexley, and a third S, Durrell. Hal's stomach turned. Simon Durrell, former bishop. The man who replaced Kearns after his stroke. He died in a car crash 2 years ago, Janice said. Foul play was ruled out. But what if it wasn't? Hal said, flipping pages. Taped to the inside cover of the final folder was a photograph, a group of 7 men standing around a table, smiling. Behind them, a chessboard. Pieces mid-game. The photo was dated 2009, and standing in the far corner, half in shadow, was a man with no name tag, no smile, and no reason to be there. Hal stared at him. Dark suit. Eyes like stone. It was the first time they'd seen the bishop's face. The photo haunted Hal through the night. He had it pinned to the corkboard in his office, surrounded by names and dates connected by red thread like a web spun by obsession. 7 men, 6 now dead or missing. And the 8th, unlabeled, unsmiling, watching from the shadows like he already knew how it would all end. No ID, Janice said, pacing behind him. No mention of an 8th attendee. The event wasn't even listed in the Crown Project records. He doesn't belong there, Hal said, staring at the photo. But he knew they would be there. Look at his posture. Detached. Detached but observant. Could be security, she offered. Or staff. Hal shook his head. Security doesn't hover in group portraits. And staff don't stand next to bishops and city councilmen. He turned to his desk and opened an old drawer. Inside was a battered journal, Detective Holt's. He had left it to Hal when he retired. Most of it was nonsense, half-written case notes, bar tabs, loose poetry. But toward the back, a name caught Hal's eye. Bishop's Gambit. 8 players. 1 spectre. Hal underlined it with a pencil. He knew, Hal whispered. Holt knew about this. Janice frowned. If the bishop's a real person and not just a metaphor, why reappear now? Hal looked toward the window. The sky outside was overcast again, the light thin and gray. Because the board is almost clear. And because someone's finally watching. Janice's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. The lab got a hit on the Polaroid you received, the one of Vexley. The photo paper came from a rare brand discontinued in 2015. One local dealer still stocks it. Name's Branson Keller. Let's go, Hal said, grabbing his coat. They arrived at Keller's shop just as the neon photo supply sign flickered to life. Inside, film canisters lined the shelves like relics. Branson Keller was a wiry man with bifocals and a nervous twitch. He claimed he hadn't sold the paper in years, but when Hal showed him the chess piece photo, the man turned pale. I sold a pack of that last month, Keller stammered. Tall man, dark coat. Didn't give a name. Paid in cash. Hal leaned in. Did he say anything else? Keller nodded slowly. Just one thing, as he was leaving. Said, checkmate is not the end, detective. It's the beginning. The lead from Branson Keller's shop gave Hal a fresh sense of urgency. The bishop wasn't just taunting them now. He was inviting them to follow, dragging them move by move into the heart of his game. Back at the precinct, Janice began combing financial records for anyone who purchased Crown Project properties through shell corporations. One name kept surfacing in the maze of LLCs and blind trusts, Alexandra Thorne. A developer, Janice explained. Quiet, ruthless, and politically protected. She was the silent partner behind the council's real estate flips. Crown's money trail leads straight to her. Hal nodded grimly. And if we're right, she's the bishop's queen. She's still alive, Janice said. In town. Lives in the penthouse at the Thorne building. Schedule a meeting, Hal said. No warrant yet, but maybe she'll slip up. When they arrived the next day, Alexandra Thorne greeted them with polite frost. Her apartment overlooked the city like a throne room, all glass and steel. She wore black, tailored sharp as razors. Her hair was white blonde and pulled into a flawless knot. I was wondering when someone would come knocking, she said, offering no handshake. Is this about Robert Mallory? Among others, Hal replied. You were deeply tied to the Crown Project. And several of your partners are now dead. Her lips curled, not quite a smile. Is that an accusation, detective? An observation. She walked toward the window. Do you know what power is, Mr. Granger? It's not about control. It's about immunity. The world burns, and those who hold the matchbooks are never the ones questioned. Until now, Hal said. Alexandra turned to face him fully. Her eyes were cold. Let me give you a piece of advice. The bishop is not a man. He's an idea. You can't arrest an idea. You certainly can't threaten one. Do you know who he is? Janice asked. Thorne tilted her head. I knew the man once. Long ago. He came to me with a warning before he vanished. Said one day the board would be reset. That no one would be spared, not even the Queen. And now he's back, Hal said. No, she whispered, almost to herself. He never left. As they left, Hal noticed something chilling. On a bookshelf behind her desk, tucked between hard covers, was a single black chess queen, facing backward. The elevator doors closed, leaving behind the echo of Alexandra Thorne's words. The bishop is not a man, he never left. The phrase circled Hal's mind like a hawk. She knew more, too much, but she had given them only riddles. A calculated gesture, like sacrificing a pawn to protect something more valuable. Back at the precinct, Janice pored through the financials while Hal stared again at the group photo. The 7 men, the 8th figure in the corner, and now Alexandra's chilling admission hanging in the air. I found something, Janice said, her voice tense. There's a property, off the books, buried under 4 shell companies. Rural. Outside city limits. The paperwork traces back to a defunct charity called Sanctum Fund. Hal raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. Set up in 2009? Same year as the Crown Project, she confirmed. The land's listed as a retreat center. But there's no road access, no recent tax payments. Like it was forgotten. Or hidden, Hal thought. They made the drive before dawn, headlights slicing through the mist. The road ended half a mile short of the coordinates. From there, they walked, boots crunching on gravel and moss. The property was silent. No signage. Just a wrought iron gate flanked by crumbling angel statues. Beyond that, an old lodge with boarded windows and a sagging roof. Inside, it was a time capsule, dust-coated furniture, empty wine glasses, a fireplace with half-charred wood. In the study, Hal found something buried beneath a collapsed bookshelf, a chessboard carved into the wood of the floor itself. It wasn't decorative. It was part of the room, stone inlay for black and white squares, bloodstains in the grooves. And in the center, a single piece remained. A black bishop. Janice picked up a faded guest book from the mantel. Names inside: Mallory, Bexley, Durrell, Thorne, and the final entry, written in angular cursive: E. Holt. Hal's stomach dropped. Holt was here. Looks like he signed in. No date, Janice whispered. But if this was a retreat for the Pillars, what if this was where it all started? Hal stared at the board again. This isn't a crime scene. Janice looked at him. Then what is it? He stepped back, voice cold and quiet. It's the origin square. The lodge whispered with memory. Hal stood motionless above the embedded chessboard, the black bishop casting a long, narrow shadow across the room as the morning sun pierced through a shattered windowpane. He remembered Holt, his old mentor, talking about a game no one else understood. A game that wasn't played in courtrooms or back alleys, but behind curtains and under seal. Now Holt's name was written in the guest book like a final confession. Janice snapped a photo of the bishop piece. We need to talk to him. Hal shook his head slowly. He's dead. She turned sharply. What? 2 years ago. Boat crash off Crescent Bay. Body was found, but the cause was unclear. He'd retired by then, off the grid. But this, she held up the guest book. This says he was a part of whatever happened here. Before any of them started dying. Hal picked up a charred page from the fireplace. The edge still bore typewriter text. Only 7 can sit. The 8th watches. A shiver ran through him. The 8th man in the photo, the bishop, was never seated. Never joined. Just watched. And Holt, did he warn them? Or betray them? They left the lodge with a box of files, guest records, and an old camera they found stashed beneath the stairs. Back at the precinct, Janice developed the film. Most shots were nothing: blurry trees, candlelit rooms, wine bottles. But then came the final frame, 7 chairs in a circle, all occupied. And in the background, just behind a curtain, was a shadow. Not a man. A shape. Thin, still, cloaked in shadow. Janice stared at it. That's not possible. That's not... Hal turned away. Get me Holt's case files. Every case he touched from 2008 to 2010. I don't care how small. Pull them from archives if you have to. You think he left a trail? I think he saw the whole board, Hal said. And whatever scared Holt enough to disappear, it's still moving pieces. That night, as Hal lit a cigarette by the window, he thought of a phrase Holt once told him. You don't play chess with the bishop, Hal. You just try not to be a piece. Hal's eyes burned from hours of scanning Holt's files. Case after case, a tapestry of corruption, cover-ups, and unexplained deaths. But one thread tugged harder than the rest: a report on Simon Durrell's death, the bishop who replaced Kearns. The file was marked unresolved, but the details hinted at something darker than an accident. Witnesses said Durrell's car had skidded on a rain-slicked road, yet the vehicle's brakes showed no signs of failure. Hal's gut twisted. Someone had made sure the brakes worked, until the last moment. Janice entered, holding a new file. I dug into Alexandra Thorne's past. Turns out she wasn't just a developer, she was Darrell's closest ally. Publicly they were partners, privately some say more. Hal frowned. A queen and a bishop. Dangerous combo. Janice nodded. I also found that Holt was investigating a secret ledger, the Crown Ledger, detailing bribes, threats, and payments. The ledger disappeared after Holt's disappearance. Hal leaned back, fingers steepled. The ledger is the key. Whoever controls it controls the game. Suddenly, the precinct phone rang. Janice answered, then glanced at Hal with wide eyes. It's a tip. An address. Someone claiming to have the ledger. Hal grabbed his coat. Let's move. We're running out of time. The address led them to a derelict warehouse near the docks. Inside, amidst crates and rust, a man waited. His face was obscured, but his voice was calm. You want the ledger, he said. But it comes with a price. Hal stepped forward. Name it. The man smiled coldly. One last game. Win, and the ledger is yours. Lose, and you become the next piece to fall. Hal met Janice's eyes. This was no longer just a case. It was a battle for survival. The warehouse smelled of dust and rust, but the air felt charged, as if the ghosts of past moves lingered in every shadow. The man led Hal and Janice to a table illuminated by a single, swinging bulb. Upon it lay a worn chessboard, pieces mid-game, frozen in tension. Sit, the man said, voice low and sharp. You play white. Hal took the seat, the polished wooden pieces cool under his fingers. Janice stood behind him, eyes darting between the board and the man. You must know, the stranger continued. This isn't a normal game. Every move echoes the past, and every sacrifice is real. Hal nodded slowly. If the ledger's the prize, then the stakes are clear. The man smiled thinly, making the first move, a swift advance of a pawn. The game unfolded deliberately, each piece a symbol, each capture a message. Hal's mind raced, not just to win, but to decipher the hidden code beneath the moves. The man's play was ruthless but precise, mirroring the cold strategy of the bishop's killings. Hal responded cautiously, recalling every name, every death linked to the chess pieces. As the final pieces dwindled, the man leaned in. You see, detective, the bishop's game is more than vengeance. It's reckoning. Janice's voice was barely a whisper. Reckoning for what? The man's gaze hardened. For the sins of those who thought themselves untouchable. The corruption, the betrayals, the lives crushed under greed. Hal's queen was cornered, his king exposed. The last move hung between them like a guillotine's blade. Then Hal saw it, the pattern he missed. A sacrifice leading to checkmate, yes, but also revealing the true name behind the bishop. He smiled grimly and moved his knight. Check. The man's eyes flickered, respect and defeat mingling. You won, he said, nodding. The ledger is yours. He handed Hal a battered leather-bound book. Hal opened it slowly, the weight of secrets pressing down. And as he looked up, he knew the game was far from over. The leather-bound ledger felt heavier than its worn pages suggested. Hal flipped through the brittle sheets, dense with names, dates, payments, an intricate web of corruption stretching back over a decade. Each entry was a thread tying the powerful to greed, blackmail, and worse. Janice leaned over his shoulder. This could bring the whole Pillars network down. Hal nodded slowly. But it's more than that. Look here. He pointed to a name scrawled repeatedly near large sums, Elias Kearns. The first bishop, Janice whispered. The one who died of a stroke, or so we thought. Hal's eyes darkened. This ledger proves Kearns was the linchpin, the puppet master behind the scenes. Janice's fingers trembled as she traced the list of his known associates. And the bishop who's killing now? Maybe he's the last piece trying to undo Kearns' legacy. Hal slammed the ledger shut. Then whoever the bishop is, He's playing both sides. They returned to the precinct with new urgency. Hal called a trusted journalist, someone unafraid of shaking Eldergate's foundations. "We have the ledger," Hal said, voice low. "It's time the city learned the truth." But as they prepared to release the information, a knock came at Hal's door. Standing there was a man in a dark suit, no smile, no name tag, eyes like stone. The bishop had arrived. The room fell silent, thick with tension. Hal's heart pounded as the man stepped inside, his gaze cold and unreadable. The bishop wasn't just a shadow anymore. He was flesh and bone, the embodiment of the city's darkest reckoning. "You've come far, detective," the bishop said quietly, voice smooth like silk wrapped around steel. "But the game isn't finished." Hal stood, fists clenched. "Who are you? Why kill those men?" The bishop's eyes flickered. "Because they were all players, complicit in a corrupt game. My mission isn't vengeance. It's justice, delivered piece by piece." Janice moved beside Hal, ready but wary. Hal asked, "Then why threaten us? Why the chess riddles?" "A game needs rules," the bishop replied. "And every player must understand the stakes. The pieces on the board are expendable, but not the game itself." Janice challenged him. "You think you're above the law?" The bishop's lips curled. "I am the law where they failed. But I'm not without mercy. You have a choice, walk away, or become part of the final act." Hal's mind raced. The ledger, the deaths, the warnings, it all pointed here. To this moment. "I won't stop until the truth is out," Hal said firmly. The bishop nodded slowly. "Then prepare yourself, detective. Because the final move is coming." With that, he turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Janice exhaled sharply. "We're in deeper than ever." Hal looked at the ledger on his desk, feeling the weight of every secret and every lost life. "This isn't just a game," Hal said. "It's the city's reckoning." The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and whispered threats. Hal and Janice worked tirelessly, preparing the ledger's evidence for release, knowing that the bishop's shadow loomed closer with every passing hour. Then came the call, an anonymous tip leading them to an abandoned church on the outskirts of Eldergate. The bishop's signature was unmistakable, a black bishop chess piece left on the altar. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Flickering candlelight revealed a single figure waiting. "You've done well, detective," the bishop said, stepping forward. "But this game, this city, demands a final sacrifice." Hal's hand hovered near his gun. "What do you want?" The bishop's voice softened. "To end the cycle. To ensure that the corruption that poisoned Eldergate dies with me." Janice stepped forward. "You think killing you will end it?" "No," the bishop replied. "But removing the players and exposing the truth is a start." Suddenly, sirens blared outside. Backup had arrived, tipped off by Janice's secret call. The bishop smiled faintly. "The board is set, detective. Now comes checkmate." Before Hal could react, the bishop vanished into the shadows, leaving behind the cold echo of a game unfinished. Hal and Janice exchanged determined looks. "This isn't over," Hal said. "No," Janice agreed. "It's just beginning." The abandoned church stood empty once more, but the weight of the bishop's words hung in the air like a ghost. Hal and Janice returned to the precinct, their minds racing, every detail spinning into a tangled web of possibilities. Back at his desk, Hal opened the ledger again, searching for a pattern they had missed. The entries seemed to form a hidden narrative, names linked by secret meetings, payments funneled through offshore accounts, and coded references to a final event scheduled to unfold soon. Janice scanned the files on her laptop. "Look at this. Several council members are planning to meet at the old city hall tomorrow night, secretly. No public records. No security detail." Hal frowned. "A gathering of the last pillars. The final chapter in this twisted story. We need to be there," Janice said. "Before the bishop makes his move." Hal nodded. "We'll bring backup." But deep in the shadows, the bishop watched, waiting. The pieces were all moving toward the inevitable confrontation, the checkmate that would decide Eldergate's fate once and for all. Night cloaked Eldergate in a blanket of shadows as Hal, Janice, and a small team of trusted officers approached the old city hall. The building loomed silent and imposing, its windows dark, its grandeur faded but not forgotten. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The council members gathered in a dimly lit chamber, unaware that their secret meeting was no longer hidden. Hal motioned for his team to spread out, eyes scanning every face, the last of the pillars, each carrying the weight of guilt and fear. Suddenly, the heavy doors slammed shut behind them. A voice echoed through the hall, calm, measured, unmistakably the bishop's. "Welcome, players," it said. "The game ends tonight." Hal's heart pounded as the lights flickered on, revealing the bishop standing at the head of the room. His identity, at last, was clear, a man neither fully enemy nor ally, but something in between. "You thought you could hide behind lies and power," the bishop continued. "But every piece falls eventually," Janice whispered. "It's a trap." Hal nodded, raising his weapon. "Stay sharp." The bishop raised a hand, and guards emerged from hidden doors, closing in. The final moves were at hand. The city's fate balanced on a knife's edge. The chamber erupted into chaos. Shouts echoed off the stone walls as Hal and Janice's team moved into action, their training and grit tested to the limit. The bishop's guards advanced, but the officers were determined not to let corruption's final act unfold unchecked. Hal ducked behind a marble pillar, trading fire with a figure clad in black. He caught a glimpse of the bishop moving calmly through the fray, eyes sharp and calculating. Janice covered his flank, shouting over the noise. "We need to isolate him." Hal nodded, signaling his team. They closed in, cornering the bishop near a cracked window overlooking the city. "Your game's over," Hal said, voice steady despite the pounding adrenaline. The bishop smiled, almost pitying. "A game has no end, detective. Only new beginnings." Suddenly, he lunged for a concealed knife. Hal reacted, catching the wrist just in time. In the struggle, the bishop dropped a small device on the floor, a detonator. Janice dove forward, smashing it underfoot before Hal could react. The bishop sighed, surrendering. "You may have won this round." Hal handcuffed him, eyes never leaving the calm in the man's gaze. "Eldergate will finally see the truth," Hal said, "and maybe start to heal." The bishop's smile was faint but genuine. "And so the board resets. Until the next game." The first light of dawn spilled over Eldergate as the city slowly awoke from its long nightmare. News of the bishop's arrest and the release of the crown ledger swept through every paper, every broadcast, unraveling years of deception. Hal and Janice stood outside the precinct, watching the city breathe anew. The streets still held scars, but hope flickered in the air. Janice smiled, exhaustion softened by relief. "We did it." Hal nodded, lighting a cigarette. "We did. But this city, it's never truly free. The game just changes." A young officer approached, handing Hal a file. Inside, a simple note. "A new player has arrived. The board awaits." Hal's eyes narrowed, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Looks like the game isn't over," he said quietly. Janice chuckled. "Good thing we're still here." Together, they turned toward the rising sun, ready for whatever came next. Weeks passed, but the quiet that settled over Eldergate felt fragile, like the calm before a storm. Hal and Janice pored over new leads, cases reopened, and whispers of another network stirring beneath the surface. One evening, a cryptic message arrived at the precinct, an unmarked envelope containing a single chess piece, a black knight. Janice frowned, turning it over. "The bishop's gone, but this means someone else is moving." Hal's gaze darkened. "A new player in the shadows. And they know how to play." They knew the city's peace was temporary. The old games never truly ended, they simply waited for the next move. Hal looked out over the city skyline, lights twinkling like pieces on a board. The game was beginning again. The black knight sat heavy in Janice's palm, its glossy surface cold and foreboding. It wasn't just a message, It was a challenge. A promise that the shadows in Eldergate were stirring once more. Hal studied the piece, memories of the bishop's game flooding back. Knights don't move in straight lines. They strike when you least expect it. Janice nodded grimly. And they're harder to track. Their investigation deepened, tracing financial trails and whispered rumors of a new faction rising, one with roots even darker than the pillars. As night fell over the city, Hal and Janice found themselves back at the old lodge, the birthplace of the first game. The air was thick with history and threat. Suddenly, a noise, footsteps from the shadows. A figure stepped forward, face obscured but voice calm and chilling. "The game continues," they said. "Are you ready to play detective?" The figure's words hung in the stale air, a chilling promise that echoed in Hal's mind. The faint moonlight revealed a flash of steel at their side, a silent warning. Janice stepped forward, eyes sharp. "Who are you?" The stranger tilted their head slightly. "Someone who's tired of the old games. Someone who wants to rewrite the rules." Hal's grip tightened on his coat. "Then why the games? Why the pieces?" "Because power always plays in shadows, detective. And only those who understand the board can survive." Before Hal could respond, the figure slipped into the darkness, disappearing as silently as they'd appeared. Janice exhaled sharply. "We're chasing ghosts now." Hal looked back at the lodge, its secrets deeper than ever. "The game isn't just about survival," Hal said quietly. "It's about knowing when to strike, and when to wait." And as the night closed in, the city waited with bated breath. The dawn painted the sky in muted grays as Hal and Janice sifted through evidence scattered across the precinct. The Black Knight was more than a symbol. It was a signature, a calling card from someone playing a deeper game. Janice pointed at a map pinned to the wall, littered with red dots. "These are the latest crime scenes. Look how they form a pattern, like moves on a chessboard." Hal traced the points slowly, a slow realization dawning. "They're signaling. Communicating." He turned to Janice, voice low. "We're being baited, dragged into a trap." Janice's eyes narrowed. "Then we set the board ourselves." With renewed purpose, they planned their next move, knowing that in this game, every step mattered, and a single miscalculation could cost everything. The city held its breath, waiting to see who would claim victory in the shadows. The precinct was unusually quiet, save for the low hum of computers and the occasional rustle of papers. Hal and Janice sat opposite each other, maps and files sprawled across the table between them. The city's latest string of incidents formed a chilling pattern, one they could no longer ignore. Janice tapped a red marker on the map. "These locations, each crime scene corresponds to a square on the board, arranged in a way that's too deliberate to be coincidence. Someone's sending us a message." Hal's eyes narrowed as he traced the points with his finger. "The chessboard. The moves are in the open, but the meaning is hidden. Whoever's doing this is playing a long game, weaving threats and signals into the city's fabric." Janice leaned back, folding her arms. "And we're the pawns caught in the middle." Hal shook his head, grim determination settling in his gaze. "No. We're the players. We just have to see the full board." They pored over the ledger again, cross-referencing names and dates, trying to predict the next move. The new faction's reach was broader than they'd imagined: politicians, business leaders, even some from within law enforcement. The clock ticked relentlessly, each second pushing them closer to the next strike. Suddenly, Janice's phone buzzed. A message appeared. "Meet at Blackstone Park. Midnight. Come alone." Hal read it aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "They want to talk." Janice's face tightened. "Or lure us into a trap." Hal stood, grabbing his coat and holstering his gun. "We go prepared. But we go." Midnight arrived with a cold wind that whispered through the trees of Blackstone Park. Shadows danced under the street lamps as Hal and Janice moved cautiously through the mist. A lone figure emerged from the darkness, face obscured beneath a hood. "You're brave to come," the figure said, voice low but steady. Hal stepped forward. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure reached into their pocket and tossed a folded note onto a nearby bench. Before they could speak again, a sudden noise, a sharp crack from the bushes, cut through the stillness. Janice spun, gun raised, but the figure vanished into the shadows. Hal unfolded the note, his eyes scanning the cryptic message. The next move will break the board. Prepare to lose what you hold most. Janice's voice was tense. This is bigger than we thought. It's personal. Hal nodded slowly, the weight of the warning sinking deep. Then we make our move, he said. Before the game ends. The city slept unaware, but in the darkness, the pieces were shifting, closer to the final play. The chilling note lingered in Hal's mind as dawn broke over Aldergate. The city's usual clamor was muted, almost indifferent to the brewing storm beneath its surface. But Hal and Janice knew better. The game was tightening its noose, and every second could be their last. Back at the precinct, the atmosphere was tense. Officers exchanged glances. Whispers floated about the unknown faction's next strike. Hal paced, his mind racing through possibilities, strategies, and the faces behind the shadows. Janice joined him, handing over a dossier. We've traced the note's origin to a burner phone, a dead end, but it led us to a storage unit on Merrick Street. Hal nodded, flipping through the sparse files. We have to check it out. Could be the key to understanding what's coming. The unit was tucked away in a forgotten industrial park, surrounded by rusted warehouses and cracked pavement. Nightfall had arrived, casting long shadows that seemed to watch and wait. Hal and Janice approached cautiously, weapons drawn. Inside, the air was thick with dust and neglect. Boxes stacked haphazardly, old furniture, crates sealed tight. Janice's flashlight beam landed on a small table in the corner, cluttered with maps, photographs, and a chessboard mid-play. Hal examined the board. The pieces, they're set for a final move. Look at the positions. This matches the pattern from the city. Janice's eyes locked on a photo pin nearby, a grainy image of a young woman, her eyes hauntingly familiar. Who is she? Hal wondered aloud. A sudden creak behind them made their blood run cold. They spun around, guns raised. From the shadows stepped a man, hands raised slowly. I'm not here to hurt you, he said. But there are sacrifices coming, and you need to know the truth. Hal's voice was steady, but his heart thundered. Start talking. The man's eyes glistened with weariness. The next move will cost you more than you think. Janice exchanged a glance with Hal. The game was no longer just about catching a killer, it was about surviving the inevitable loss. The man's eyes flickered with something between regret and resolve as he stepped further into the dim light of the storage unit. Hal and Janice remained poised, weapons lowered but ready, absorbing every word that might unravel the knot of threats suffocating Aldergate. My name is Marcus Vale, he began, voice low and steady. I used to work for the Pillars, the very network you're hunting. But I left when the corruption became too dark to ignore. Janice's brow furrowed. Then why send the note? Why draw us here? Marcus's gaze hardened. Because the new faction isn't just a threat, they're a reckoning. They want to dismantle the city's power structure, no matter the cost. Hal exchanged a quick look with Janice. What cost? Marcus swallowed hard. Sacrifices. People you care about. Innocents caught in the crossfire. It's a purge disguised as justice. Janice's voice trembled. We need names, Marcus. We need to know who's behind this. He nodded grimly, pulling out a folder thick with documents, photos, and coded messages. This is everything I've gathered. The players, the plan. The target date is close, less than a week. Hal flipped through the papers, each one a piece of the puzzle. If this is true, we're running out of time. Marcus met their eyes. There's one more thing. You need to trust no one. The faction's reach is deeper than you think. Even inside your own ranks. Janice's pulse quickened. How do we stop it? Marcus's expression turned grave. By making the hardest move yet. The one that will break the board. Hal clenched his jaw. Then we prepare for the endgame. Outside, the city lights flickered, unaware of the storm gathering just beneath its surface. The weight of Marcus's confession pressed down like a storm cloud. Hal and Janice left the storage unit with the folder in hand, each step heavier than the last. The city's usual buzz felt distant, as if Eldergate itself was holding its breath. Back at headquarters, Hal spread the documents across the war room table. Faces stared back from photographs, politicians, business magnates, even law enforcement officers. The web was vast, tangled, and deadly. Janice traced a line connecting two names. If these are the key players, the faction's roots run deeper than the bishop's. Hal nodded grimly. And we have no idea who we can trust. Hours bled into the night as they strategized. Every phone call, every meeting was a potential trap. Allies were few, and suspicion was everywhere. Janice tapped her finger on a new piece of intel. The faction's next move targets City Hall during the mayor's speech in 3 days. They want to expose, or maybe destroy. Hal's gaze darkened. We need to protect the mayor, and prepare for whatever comes. A sudden alert from dispatch crackled through the radio. All units, we have reports of a break-in at the mayor's residence. Hal and Janice exchanged a tense look. The game was escalating. Janice grabbed her coat. Let's move. As they raced into the night, the lines between friend and foe blurred, and the board was set for a battle that would decide Eldergate's fate. The flashing lights of patrol cars painted the mayor's estate in frantic reds and blues. Hal and Janice arrived just as officers secured the perimeter, faces taut with tension. The mansion, usually a symbol of safety and power, now felt vulnerable, its walls whispering secrets of danger. Inside, the chaos was contained but palpable. Officers combed the grounds while forensic teams examined shattered windows and disturbed furniture. The intruder had vanished, leaving behind a chilling message, a black knight chess piece resting on the mayor's desk. Hal picked it up, the cool plastic cold in his palm. They're taunting us. Janice's eyes flicked around the room. This is no ordinary break-in. It's a warning. The mayor, shaken but unharmed, stood nearby, flanked by his security detail. Who would do this? And why target me? Hal's jaw tightened. Because you're a symbol, either a target to protect or a piece to sacrifice. Janice's phone buzzed. A new tip. Someone spotted a suspicious vehicle near the docks. Without hesitation, Hal and Janice rushed out, joining officers in a high-stakes chase through the city's industrial underbelly. The cold night air bit at their faces, adrenaline sharpening their senses. They cornered the vehicle, a van with its engine running, doors ajar. Inside, stacks of files and several more chess pieces lay scattered. Janice's voice was steady. They're escalating. Hal stared at the contents, the gravity of the situation settling in. The game was far from over. It was only becoming more dangerous. The abandoned warehouse at the docks was cold and echoing, shadows stretching like silent sentinels against rusted metal beams. Hal and Janice swept through the space, flashlights cutting swaths through the darkness as they examined the files seized from the van. The papers detailed covert meetings, coded transactions, and lists of names, some familiar, some new. Each page was a thread in a vast conspiracy that extended far beyond Eldergate's borders. Janice frowned, holding up a map marked with red pins clustered around several key locations. They're planning simultaneous moves, disrupting power, communications, and law enforcement. Hal tapped a photo pinned to the board, a man in his 40s, eyes sharp but worn. This is Carver. He's been under the radar, but looks like he's the faction strategist. Janice's voice dropped. If we take him out, it could cripple their operations. A sudden noise made them both spin. A figure darted from the shadows, knocking Janice to the ground before Hal could react. The attacker vanished into the night, leaving behind a single note. You're closer than you think. But the game is far from over. Hal helped Janice up, her eyes burning with determination. We're in deeper now. No turning back. Outside, the city held its breath once more, caught in a deadly dance of shadows and secrets. The news spread quickly. Eldergate was under siege. The faction had unleashed coordinated attacks across the city, power outages, communication blackouts, and sudden outbreaks of violence that sent the streets into chaos. Hal and Janice were at the heart of the storm, orchestrating a response while racing against the clock. Each call, each decision, carried the weight of countless lives. In the command center, monitors flickered with feeds from every corner of the city. Officers fought to regain control. Hospitals braced for casualties. Janice's voice was sharp over the radio. Focus on protecting civilians. Don't let them turn the city into a battlefield. Hal studied the chessboard on the table. Pieces scattered, some toppled. The analogy was painfully clear. The faction's strategy was to fracture the city's defenses, forcing Hal and Janice into a desperate defense. A new message arrived, this time a video, grainy and distorted. A masked figure spoke, their voice cold and final. The game ends when the city falls. Choose your next move carefully. Hal exchanged a grim look with Janice. They want us to crumble. Janice clenched her fists. Then we show them Eldergate fights back. Outside, sirens wailed and the city held its ground, its heart beating defiantly in the darkest hour. The city's pulse quickened with every siren and shout. Amid the chaos, Hal and Janice launched a desperate hunt for Carver, the elusive strategist whose plans threatened to tear Eldergate apart. They followed a trail of coded messages, intercepted phone calls, and secret meetings whispered in dimly lit bars. Every clue pulled them deeper into the faction's tangled web, but also closer to danger. Janice's phone buzzed with a location, a warehouse on the city's outskirts. We have a lead, she said, eyes sharp with determination. Hal nodded. Time to end this. Under the cover of night they moved in, flanked by a tactical team. The warehouse was silent, shadows thick as they advanced. Inside they found evidence of the faction's operations, weapons caches, hacked devices, and documents confirming plans for a final, devastating strike. Then, a sudden movement. Carver stepped out from the shadows, hands raised but a cold smile on his lips. You're brave to come here, he said. But this city belongs to those willing to play the game to the bitter end. Hal leveled his gun. It's over, Carver. Carver laughed, a sound without humor. You think so? The final move is yet to come. Before they could react, explosions rocked the warehouse, smoke filling the air. Janice shouted, Fall back! It's a trap! They raced through the chaos, the stakes higher than ever. The hunt was far from over. The blast left the warehouse in ruins, smoke curling like dark fingers into the night sky. Hal and Janice barely escaped with their lives, coughing through the thick haze as alarms blared in the distance. Back at the precinct, the mood was grim. The faction's reach had proven deadly and personal. Janice slammed a file on the table, frustration etched into her features. We have a mole. Hal's eyes darkened. Someone feeding Carver information from inside. Janice paced, voice low but sharp. Everything we've done, every step we've taken, it's been compromised. Hal rubbed his temples. We have to find them before it's too late. Suspicion seeped into every corner of the precinct. Colleagues glanced sideways, secrets whispered behind closed doors. Trust fractured like fragile glass. Meanwhile, Hal dug deeper into personnel records, cross-referencing movements and communications. A pattern emerged, a name that refused to fit. Janice confronted the officer. Why the late-night calls? Why the unexplained absences? The officer's calm mask cracked. You don't understand what's at stake. Hal stepped in. Then start talking. The confession spilled out, blackmail, threats, loyalties torn. The faction's grip was tighter than anyone had imagined. Janice clenched her fists. We end this now. No more games. Hal nodded. Time to make the final move. The precinct felt colder than usual, as if the weight of betrayal seeped into the very walls. Hal and Janice prepared for the confrontation that would decide the city's fate, the final play on a board stained with sacrifice and deception. With the mole's confession in hand, they coordinated a sting operation aimed straight at the faction's core. Every piece was positioned carefully, every move calculated. The target, an underground safe house rumored to be the faction's command center. As night fell, Hal, Janice, and a tactical team surrounded the building. The air was thick with tension, every breath held in anticipation. Janice whispered into her radio. "Ready on your mark." Hal's hand hovered near his holster. "Wait for my signal." Inside, shadows shifted, voices whispered orders, the pulse of imminent chaos. Then, the door burst open. "Police! Everyone down!" Gunfire erupted, echoing through the narrow hallways. Hal and Janice moved swiftly, covering each other as they pushed deeper. Faces emerged, fighters, strategists, pawns in a deadly game. And then Carver. He stood tall, a twisted grin curling his lips. "You've come far, but the game's not over." Hal stepped forward, voice steady. "It ends now." Carver's smile faltered as officers closed in. The final move had been made. Outside, Eldergate held its breath. The dawn was near, and with it, hope. The aftermath of the raid was a quiet storm. The faction's leaders lay in custody, their plans unraveled, but the scars they left ran deep. Eldergate was bruised, shaken, yet defiant. Hal and Janice stood on the rooftop of the precinct, overlooking the city bathed in the soft light of dawn. The streets below were slowly waking, unaware of the darkness that had nearly swallowed them whole. Janice exhaled slowly. "It's over." Hal's gaze lingered on the horizon. "For now. But the game changes. New players always emerge." She turned to him, a tired smile touching her lips. "Maybe. But today we won." Their victory was bittersweet, friends lost, trust broken, but justice reclaimed. Inside, the precinct buzzed with cautious optimism. Officers shared stories of survival and resilience. Hal's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "The board resets. The game continues." He looked up at Janice, who met his gaze with a knowing nod. "We'll be ready." As Eldergate stirred to life, two detectives prepared for whatever shadows the future might cast. The game was never truly over. The city of Eldergate was waking slowly, wrapped in the delicate haze of early morning light that softened the jagged edges of its crime-scarred streets. After the storm of the past weeks, the relentless pursuit of a shadowy faction, the betrayals, the near collapse of the city's fragile peace, the dawn felt like a fragile promise. A new beginning. Hal stood by the precinct's front steps, the cool breeze tugging at his coat as he watched people moving about their daily lives. Shopkeepers setting out their wares, children laughing on the sidewalks, and the occasional patrol car cruising the avenues. Life went on. But beneath it all, a quiet tension hummed, a reminder that the game they had just played might be over, but the city's story was far from finished. Janice joined him silently, sliding into step beside him. She exhaled deeply, a sound part relief, part exhaustion. "Feels strange, doesn't it? This quiet. Like the calm before another storm." Hal nodded. "We pushed back the darkness this time. But it never really goes away. It just hides, waits for an opening." They shared a look, one forged in the fires of shared danger and trust earned through hardship. The weight of everything they'd endured settled between them. Friends lost. The city's underbelly exposed. A network of corruption and violence ripped apart, only to reveal new threads weaving beneath. "Remember that message I got yesterday?" Hal said, pulling out his phone. "The one from an unknown number. The board resets. The game continues." Janice's eyes narrowed, but there was no fear there. Only resolve. "Then we keep playing. Because if we don't, who will?" They turned to face the precinct doors, where officers bustled with renewed energy, cases being closed, new leads being followed. The law was fragile, imperfect, but it was theirs to uphold. Hal took a breath and began to speak, his voice low but steady, carrying the weight of their journey. "This city, it's like a chessboard. Each of us a piece, some pawns, some knights, some kings and queens. Moves are made every day, some obvious, others hidden in shadows. Every choice can change everything. Sacrifices must be made. Sometimes by those we least expect. And sometimes it takes losing what you hold most dear to protect what remains." Janice listened, her hand brushing lightly over the black night pin she wore on her jacket, a quiet symbol of the battle they'd fought, the dangers they'd faced. Hal smiled faintly. But in the end, the game isn't about winning or losing. It's about standing your ground, protecting what matters, and never giving up, even when the board seems stacked against you. The city beyond was waking now, full of promise and peril. Eldergate's shadows might lengthen at dusk, but its people would continue to fight for light. And so would Hal and Janice. As they walked back inside, ready to face the next move, the chessboard waited silently, pieces arranged for the next game. Checkmate was never certain. The story would continue. But for tonight, the city was theirs to protect.